Hello and welcome to this episode of Quaker Tap. This is going to be the last in this Christmas series of Quakers and Christmas. And in this video, I wanted to look at Quaker figures or how maybe Quakers can find themselves in the Nativity story. We're going to be looking at Mary, the shepherds, and the wise men, and how all I'm not going to say they're Quakers, obviously, because they're not, but how they can be telling maybe a particular Quaker message, or how we can, as Quakers, use this story as a way maybe that's helpful. Um, if you completely disagree with me, then obviously that's fine. This is just what I've been musing on the last couple of weeks before I started making these videos. And so interested to hear what you think. And yeah, let's delve into it. So I think probably the most important person in the Nativity, bar Jesus, clearly, is Mary. And I think Mary is a very fascinating figure as a Quaker. And I can sort of already hear people maybe writing their noses at this, but hear me out. So if we think about it, the way that I view Mary, and I know this isn't necessarily, I'm not saying this is the Quaker position at all, but the way that I see Mary is that this is someone who, if we read the story, whether we believe it or not, that's another matter. But if we read the story, this is someone who literally had God inside of them. And as Quakers, we have to take that seriously because that's what, not what we're trying to do, but that's what, how we envisage our relationship with the divine. We experience it as an internal and spiritual thing, and that God grows in us, that we grow with God or the inner light, and that's what we're trying to do. That's how we're trying to build our relationship. It's all done within. It's all done internally. It's all done spiritually. And so, if we look at Mary, this is made obviously in a physical way, is precisely what she's doing. She has this meeting, she has this day of visitation, if you'd like to think of it like that, when Angel Gabriel came to tell her that she was going to give birth to Jesus. The day of visitation, that's a term from, well, I'm not sure if it actually is Robert Barclay, but he's the one that springs to mind with it, mainly the day of visitation, which is basically when uh, the inner light knocks on the door, so to speak, and you're then given, you can then respond to that or you can not respond. Um, and this is what happens to Mary. Mary has this day of visitation when the angel Gabriel comes, and he tells her that this is going to happen. And well, I don't know if she does have a choice. I'm not sure if she could actually turn around and say no, thank you. Um, be a very different story, but she does, whether she has a choice or not, she does accept, and she says, "Yes, I will have this baby, and let it be as you say it will be." And I think that's, from a Quaker perspective, precisely what we're trying to do. We have these experiences where the inner light knocks on the door when we're looking to try and uh, when sort of God makes that first move and we respond to it. And then there's that growing of godliness in us as we develop that relationship. Obviously, we don't give birth to God, and God, we don't believe that God is actually in us physically. It is spiritual. But I think if we follow that journey with Mary, that is kind of the pattern of what we're looking for. It starts off with God knocking on the door, us accepting or not, and then that relationship developing and blossoming us over time. I also quite like then one of the first things that Mary does after that is she goes out and she meets with Elizabeth, who is also pregnant under quite extreme and unexpected circumstances. Um, Elizabeth is hasn't been able to have babies, and she's quite old, and yet God um, uh, and but she was allowed, but then she did have a child. God allowed that to happen, And again, so now we've got these two people who have this, who've had this divine connection, and miraculous events happen to them, and they're coming together and they're excited about it, and they meet and they praise God. And I think, well, this is quite, and Jesus is obviously there. He's conceived in Mary's womb at that time, so it is a sort of a quasi proto Quaker meeting for worship going on there, which I really enjoy. I also really enjoy that this is a very maternal and very feminine scene, um, which doesn't happen all too often in the Bible, and I find it personally quite powerful. So that was Mary. The next two kind of follow a similar sort of pattern, but in slightly different ways. So those were the shepherds and the wise men, or kings, whatever you want to go with. Um, but I think what they both show is responding to the light. Uh, both of the characters or groups of characters are given an order, or given a message by the divine, and they're then given the choice of what they do with that. Do they listen to it or do they not? So we'll look at the shepherds first. So we all know this story. The shepherds are watching their flocks by night, and then they see a heavenly host of angels who appear to them and tell them to go to Bethlehem, because Jesus has been born, who is going to be Christ the King. Now, obviously, the shepherds could have turned around and again, just like Mary, could have said, no, actually, rather let's stay with our sheep. But they don't. They go, and they follow that leading that they were given, and they go towards God, towards the inner light, towards the source, and so on. And I suppose that is the Quaker lesson to be learnt there, is to respond to leadings. Now, these leadings didn't come from the shepherds themselves. It's not like one of them stood up and said, "Ha, we need to go to Bethlehem now," and off they went. They were given that leading externally, and they responded to it. So I suppose this makes me think about maybe a meeting for worship where sometimes the leading is yours. Sometimes you're given a message to share, and it's for others, but it's manifested in you, and you have responsibility over it, and it might have an impact on what you then need to do. But quite often, it's about listening to what the leadings of others as well, and that they may not make sense at first. If an angel started appearing to me now and telling me to go to the other end of the country or whatever to visit a baby who's been born in a stable, I mean, that wouldn't make a lot of sense to me if I didn't have all the 2,000 years of Christian messaging uh, in my culture to go by. If that happened to me, that would be a very strange thing to do. Um, and yet, these shepherds followed that instruction, even though it didn't make sense. And so I suppose the um, the Quaker message there, I suppose, is to listen to all leadings, even if you think it doesn't make sense, or even if you think it isn't for you. Because sometimes I feel that I listen to something, I'm like, I've got nothing to go on that. But then over time I see it comes back to me in my in activities in my life, and I think, I kind of see this now. Um, so follow leadings when even if they don't make sense, even if they don't come from you directly, and be obedient to that, because it might very well lead you closer to the inner light. So similarly with the wise men or kings, I'm calling them wise men because you'll see, and they also receive a sign or a leading that tells them to go to Jesus. Um, Now, kings or wise men, what I tend to think of them, however, is that if these are wise men, if these are intelligent people, to follow a star, to leave everything you had behind and follow a star to another country, and just because of you maybe working out a prophecy or something, isn't necessarily a logical thing to do. It might be in terms of your spiritual your spiritual life. But in terms of a logical goal, it isn't very logical. Um, but yet these people put their wisdom aside, or maybe not aside, maybe went above their wisdom, incorporated their wisdom with their spiritual side, and went closer to God and went on a journey towards God. And so I think just like the shepherds, they responded to a sign that maybe was a bit strange, was going above what they knew and responding to it with their logic. I'm not saying that they abandoned all their wisdom and just went and followed a star because out of foolishness. They were still wise men, but with this extra sort of super rational view of the world, to follow a star, to follow the light, that which led them closer to a closer relationship with Jesus. Another element of the story of the wise men or the three kings that I do quite like is, from a Quaker perspective as well, is how they respond to power figures or people of authority. So in the story, the wise men first go to the king Herod, um, and Herod basically tells them, "Yes, go and find this Jesus, but when you find him, let me know so I can worship him as well." And they don't. They ignore him because they know that he's not going to worship him. He wants to kill him because he sees him as a threat. And so they protect the weak there because Jesus, although God, is also a little baby, and refuses to give in to power because of what is right and what is the morally just thing to do. Again, a very Quaker message. We are constantly being told to speak truth to power, to um, to hold to a higher moral standard than what those in power tell us to, because people in power tend to not hold themselves to the highest moral standard. And so the Quaker message there is what is leading us closer to the inner light, and is power or authority figures stopping that, in which case we have to follow the light. We can't follow power, because that way would lead, if they went back, that would lead to the death of God and the death of maybe that relationship within us, and we wouldn't then be saved. We wouldn't be being true Quakers in terms of following the inner light. We will have cut that off. So what do you think? Is that rubbish? Is that I'm completely happy for people to think that is a load of rubbish. This has just been what I've been thinking on. Or do you see other Quaker messages in the Nativity story? I've missed out loads of characters. Do you see anything else that I haven't seen? As I've said before, I think Advent is a really important time for Quakers, and we should use it to invigorate our love for waiting, and the powerful and how powerful it is to be waiting. And so I think any sort of meditation or deep thinking about the Nativity is actually really important for Quakerism, not just at Christmas time, but throughout. So I'd be really interested to hear what you say. As ever, write them in the comments and I'll get back to you. So I think this probably will be my last Christmas video. So I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I really, really hope that now that I'm starting to get back in the swing of things, that there'll be a lot more videos going forward into 2023. So Merry Christmas. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up button, and do check out some of my other videos about Quakerism in the UK. If you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, please do remember to subscribe as well. It really helps. Thank you.